I want to bring up the story about Ethan Klein.
Oh, yeah.
Ethan Klein is a podcaster. He's particularly prominent, and he recently called for a terror attack against the NRA. And it's funny, Ethan Klein has been calling for, gun restrictions, gun control, but he's just, on his own podcast, exemplified exactly why people probably need guns for self-defense. On his show last week, YouTuber Ethan Klein calls for bombing of NRA conference. Klein prefaced his calls for violence by promoting sales of his new shirts, which read "End Gun Violence." So he immediately walks it back. I don't want to play it because I think YouTube doesn't allow this stuff, even in this context. There's a few things I want to point out about this. Allies, liberals in the media are saying Ethan Klein was joking about doing it. His wife says, "I feel hopeless, like there's nothing we can do." I'm paraphrasing. Then he says, "Does anyone know what's going on at that NRA conference?" Calls for extreme violence against it. His wife then says, "Mm-hmm." And that's what the "mm-hmm" is what really got me. I'm like, yo, he just said told your audience of millions of people to commit a terror attack, and you were just like, "Mm-hmm." No. His producer apparently said something, and then he immediately walks it back like, "Okay, no, don't do that. Apparently during the show as well, he told people to fire guns into the air.
What?
And then when he was also told, like, "No, don't do that," the bolts come back down, he said, "Okay, well, blanks, just fire blanks." He called for sticking a piece of wood into the Texas governor's wheelchair to cause him physical injury, I guess. The video ends up getting taken down. He's been suspended from YouTube for a week. And his immediate reaction was to say, he doesn't believe in violence, but Republicans are the party of dead children, and that now they're harassing him and sending him death threats, and they're anti-Semites. So it's mind-numbing, that this is the current state of politics. I genuinely, seriously, I wonder why it is people would be entertained or like that they would like that idea. I don't know who would watch a show like that and be like, yes, that's a good thing, and I will defend that.
There's a lot of people, apparently.
Right.
Isn't this the story of the past 6 years? The one side telling the other what they shouldn't do, but at the same time advocating for much the same themselves. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's an audience for it, apparently.
Well, Kathy Griffin with the Trump severed head. Yeah. Madonna saying she wants to blow up the White House. Snoop Dogg shooting.
Kids, Covington Kids wood chipper.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I gotta say,
people like this can make threats towards anyone whose political views are unpopular, and that's considered completely socially acceptable, which is kind of one of the reasons you need to arm yourself.
Well, right. So my response now is, if anyone ever says, "Why would anyone in this country need a gun?" I would say, because a popular liberal YouTuber called for a terror attack on a convention, because a guy who worked for Disney called for throwing children into a wood chipper, because a comedian who does CNN's New Year's showed herself a mock holding up the severed head of the president. I can go on, but as long as they want to say stuff like that, I'm gonna exercise my right to keep and bear arms. Look, we've gotten death threats. We've gotten swatted 8 or so times. We've had the bomb squad come out here. These people are not doing themselves any justice by saying there's no reason to have guns when they are, advocating for, calling for violence. And then you see the George Floyd riots. And then I'll say that, I'll be like, well, why would people need guns? Because in 2020, we saw the worst race riots we've seen in the past 50 years with over $2 billion in tracked damage. Probably more damage than that, but the insurance companies only paid up to that much. You saw around 26 to 30 or so dead people from those riots. So I kind of think the left has absolutely done everything in their power to make sure we truly understand why we need guns.
Well, they call for insurrection and threaten to riot every single time something doesn't go their way.
But we remember what happened also during the riots when the police were called. They wouldn't go into some areas. You were left to your own devices. There were business owners that thought, all I want to do is kind of guard my storefront, and I'll call the police if there's an attack, and they did so. And the police couldn't or wouldn't come in there. So, that seemed to prove the point.
And then you have David Dorn, who was murdered, trying to protect, he was a retired cop and tried to protect his friend's pawn shop during those riots, and he was murdered, so... And I think what's also upsetting is the exact opposite with Trump and January 6th and his language. It was not even remotely anything like what this Klein guy is saying. He was saying very normal things that politicians say when they're upset about elections. And using the same sort of language. And then he also said, I think it was up to, at least 10,000 National Guard troops I want there. And it was Nancy Pelosi who turned them down. So everything is, twisted exactly the opposite.
You know what I was thinking when I was seeing the story about Ethan and H3 podcast is that he got started by doing edgy comedy on Reddit and YouTube. No political background, not well versed in politics, but because politics has become pop culture, he's adopted politics. So now he's getting more political because this is what people care about. I mean, the market dictates. For me, it's kind of the other direction. I started with political activism, working at nonprofits, and then moved into media. So I think for me, it's like I come from a place where I've lived it, I've experienced it, I've been reading about it, I've been actually advocating for policy back, when I used to do the nonprofit stuff. And now here I'm in media talking about all this. And there's a large conversation. Ethan Klein's podcast has comparable viewership to our podcast. And so he's got millions of followers who watch this, but they're getting a pop culture perspective on political issues with limited knowledge and very short relative knowledge. So, we've had some of these leftists on the show. They were like, I was too young during Joe Biden. I don't remember Obama. I was 12. It's like 22 now. I have no idea what happened. And so, for many of us, especially the people who watch in the Key demo, we remember what it was like under Obama, under Biden. We remember the killing of the Americans without charge or trial, the killing of American children, the drone strikes on civilians. We remember the corrupt dealings. Many of these people have no idea. So you'll get someone like Ethan Klein, I think he's like a year older than me, doing a show where all of a sudden he's in politics. It would be akin to me one day saying, we're a football podcast now because people like football and we're going to talk about football. Yeah, we'd retain viewership. We'd slowly start building up that audience, but I have no idea anything about football.
Well, it's scary to realize, as I do, I'm probably older than the oldest person in this room, that there are people that don't remember 10 years ago. If people started watching the news, and there's obviously a whole generation of kids that wasn't watching news until 2016 and post, which is, I think, when there was one of the biggest, fastest transformations of what we see as news with all the fake fact checks and so on and the bias. That's all they know. That's what they think the news does. The news tells you what to think. The news tells you who's right and wrong, gives their opinion and tries to force that down your throat. And the news censors so that you don't think the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just when you look at how bold they're getting and how just emboldened people who are on the side of the establishment feel to, spew this kind of violent rhetoric, could you even imagine a mainstream celebrity or YouTube celebrity who just began to comment on political issues from a conservative perspective, said that people should bomb some left-wing organization, said that they should do that, like the ACLU or a Planned Parenthood conference or something like that? I mean, first of all, it would be a story everywhere that everyone was talking about, but it would also be used as an excuse to censor every single other conservative in the sphere, because they would say, well, this one guy was a radical lunatic, and so that means we need to censor everyone else who's ever associated with them or is near them, because we're just going to get more of this unless we really stomp down on it quickly. But he can say something as horrific is this, which is literally a direct incitement to terrorism, and it's totally acceptable. He goes, well, I'm sorry, guys, and then it just goes away?
I don't think he said he was sorry at all, actually.
Wow, okay, fantastic.
I think he said, I got a little passionate there, I should walk that back. And then later came out and said it was a joke, and I'm like, dude, you weren't joking, and your wife agreed with you when you said it. It was only after your producer or somebody, he looks over at him and then says, okay, I'll walk that one back, got a little passionate there. And then he called for other things like firing guns into the air, which is lethal. Like it's extremely dangerous.
Don't blanks also kill you if they fall?
Well, blanks don't eject anything.
Well, if you put a blank up to someone's head, you can
blank
kill them.
But
cartridge.
He was saying fire into the air. There's nothing that comes out. It's just a blast. But I mean,
a crazies would hear that and take it a step too far. So I mean, it's incitement, but it's just,
if anyone on the right or anyone anti-establishment said that, their channel would be removed immediately.
Permanently.
He got permanently.
Yeah.
And
not for a week.
And they would get banned across the board from every other platform.
Yeah, has he been banned elsewhere? He's been banned on Facebook or Instagram?
No, I don't know about that. He's suspended for a week.
Can I ask a question?
From just YouTube or anything else?
Yeah, just YouTube. Just as a
so none of the other ones?
No. Just a 1 week suspension.
Yep.
Alex Jones said something. I'm going to say it. He said to people, to what? He said, get your battle rifles ready because blah, 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 blah.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying that it was figurative. They didn't care. They said, "You're gone."
Yeah.
Also, which is a much more reasonable explanation, right? There is no figurative version of go bomb these people
Someone
at this time. Yeah,
should
someone
go do
should
X.
go bomb this group. That's not figurative. That is a clear-cut, literal statement. You can't fall back, and it was just a joke, guys. Alex Jones
You know what
gets
I love?
banned from everything. Ethan Klein does it, of course.
Here's another thing that they do on these leftists will call for violence, and then they'll say in Minecraft, and I'm like,
Oh, please.
that doesn't work legally, but apparently it does because they're not getting raided by the feds. They're not getting suspended. They will say things like people need to take up their guns and go attack this group in a video game.
And then
And they're like, oh, well, we can't ban it.
when the news cycle changes to being outraged about like a phony insurrection, they're going to get up on their high horse about how insurrection is horrible, even though they're constantly calling for violence.
There was that mom that spoke at one of these school board meetings where the parents have been around the country kind of irate about all the things going on.
You mean the domestic terrorists?
Yeah.
That's
Those
right.
ones, yeah.
And she said something like, I'm coming here Monday fully armed if you make the kids wear masks, whatever it was. We're not having it anymore. And they arrested her for that. And she said she was being figurative. She meant armed to. She said something that she said, we mean to unseat you.
Right.
I didn't mean I was going to come and hurt anybody. But yeah, they arrested her.
Wait, so they arrested her.
darn
But
quick.
they didn't arrest Klein because he's calling for physical harm also on
Actually called
on
for
the
physical
governor,
harm.
on the governor.
Well,
Yeah.
He didn't mean it real fast.
I gotta.
Sure, yeah.
So
He was just joking,
Do you guys
guys.
remember Boogie? He fired a gun into the air.
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys know the story? He's a YouTuber, and some guy
No.
showed up his
No,
house,
I don't.
and he pulled out a 22 and he like raised it up and fired. He got charged for that. I'm pretty sure he got arrested and charged.
That sounds
So
right, yeah.
my point here is, what he walked it back right away and said he got a little passionate. I don't know if that's an affirmative defense for a direct incitement to terror. To be honest, like I don't know if you can call for something like that on a show to millions of people, and then when walking it back.
If people say they still heard it and that still,
Yeah.
told them
Yeah.
what you thought.
Yeah, so I don't.
Well, I was gonna do it.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm wondering if when you get arrested for terroristic threats, if you said, I immediately said no.
It probably mitigates it, but I'm not sure it erases
Yeah,
it.
I think the
Yeah.
response from the DA would be, so you confess.
Well, yeah. Well, and also as if some maniac in his fan base who would commit an act of violence is going to go, oh, he said he got too passionate. I'm not going to do it now.
Right.
I got to be honest though, I don't really care all that much, in the sense that I don't expect him to face any repercussions from this. I'm surprised he got suspended. It took like a day or two before he actually had any adverse reaction from YouTube, which was surprising. He made multiple calls for threats of assault or violence. What people need to understand about assault is that depending on your jurisdiction, assault doesn't mean physically attacking someone.
It's verbal. It can be verbal.
Or it can be an action. So
Right.
in Illinois, assault is putting someone within reasonable fear of harm. So when he called on people to fire blanks, he's calling for people to assault the home of the governor, depending on the jurisdictional context. I'm not sure Texas has that. In New York, assault is causing actual physical harm. That means that if someone grabs you but doesn't cause any visible bruise, the cops are going to be like, no assault occurred, which is weird. So it depends on jurisdiction. But when I say I don't care, nothing's going to happen. I mean, I'm surprised it did. And we know they did it years ago with the riots. We know they did it in 2017 with the riots in D.C. We know they get away with it. We know that D.C. actually paid Antifa millions of dollars in a lawsuit, or have to pay. After their charges were dismissed, the Antifa people filed a lawsuit and won against the city. So not only do they continue to do this, they continue to escalate it. Yeah, I accept that as a reality. What more can you expect?
Do you think the suspension, sort of going off a little turn here, that you didn't expect on YouTube, is that have anything to do with the Elon effect? Are there token steps being made in some instances now because everybody recognizes that when things aren't fair and they're very one-sided, someone like Elon could come in and do something?
No, he couldn't buy YouTube, and the fact that H3 wasn't terminated immediately for this shows the bias. Alex Jones got wiped out across the board on every platform all around the exact same time. And it was for nebulous reasons.
But if YouTube hadn't suspended this guy for a week, would anybody have raised Cain other than
No.
people they don't care about?
Well,
It covers them, right? And it allows them to say, oh, no, we did take action against him. Of course,
This
we
was-
suspended him.
so the issue here is what he said was so far beyond what they could ever try to defend. I mean, saying someone should bomb, a building or whatever, was so far beyond anything they could argue was allowed, they had no choice. And all they did was give him a single strike. But it's like they called it bullying and harassment. That's what they did. They said the video's been removed for bullying and harassment. I'm like, wow. Calling on your
incitement.
millions of people.
Yeah.
Incitement to a terror attack.
Yeah,
I know.
terror.
I know he walked it back after he got called out.
Doesn't matter.
But seriously, we've not been extended that courtesy. When we had Alex Jones on the show, he made a comment about the death penalty. And I immediately called him out and said, dude, none of that. You can't say that. And YouTube said, we don't care. And I was like, not only was it not me, we said no to it. And they were like, so what? And we got a warning because we didn't have, that was our first warning. So for Ethan, I guess he's already had his warning. So now you get one warning and then you move on a strike. So for us, we didn't get taken down.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said, just going back a little bit, what you said about him switching from being entertainment into something he should not be dabbling in. I think that is also just kind of generally a broader cultural problem we have with, just our education system, because, the university system and now the K through 12, it's like, in their view, they're doing the rules for radicals. So for them, using this type of aggression or using language that is incitement, for them that is actually normalized, and that's the culture is such that when a conservative, and it doesn't even get remotely close to that, they can't handle it because the default setting is to be so hard left because of our education system and culture and Hollywood and media. So it's like the soup, it's like the crock pot. That's what we soak in.
Carrie, you reminded me that a few years ago, I thought it was a joke. A lot of these things that I hear and I think is a joke and then becomes true. One of them was there were college campus authorities as well as students who were saying that if you say certain things to people, it's akin to violence. And there was actually a case where a teacher at a California college went to court and argued that these anti-abortion signs that kids were holding up on campus were akin to violence against her. She lost the case, but I thought the claim was sort of a joke. So at the same time, some people on that side are claiming mere language or mere signs, protected free speech and language is akin to violence. By the same token, when that is committed by somebody on that side, it is then viewed quite differently.
This is why I said I don't care. Because I think if you haven't realized by now the asymmetrical cultural warfare that's been going on, I don't know what to tell you. I don't think I can keep saying it every time something like this happens. Like, there's a double standard. What's happening? It's like, that was 3.5 years ago. I was talking about, the double standard. We're saying, nah. I think
it was far more pronounced in the 60s, basically. That's when I think the root of a lot of this started. So,
it goes back years. All the way. You can trace the conflict today all the way back. Literally all the way back. But
in terms of like the erosion of norms of just how things that happened in the 60s in terms of normalizing the breakdown of the family, normalizing the hatred of men and, toxic masculinity and weaponizing race, like that really, I think, had the genesis most powerfully in the 60s.
And now here we are. One of the common themes we see with a lot of these mass shootings is fatherlessness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Families broken.
One thing you don't hear, and some years ago I tried to look into this, didn't get very far, but it used to be as soon as there was a mass shooting, there was a rational discussion or a reasonable question that was asked as to what medicine the kids were on, because some of these antidepressants and antipsychotic medicines can exacerbate the feelings of violence in some. So some are apparently helped. Sometimes, as it says on the warning label, people become more suicidal and more violent. All of a sudden, I would say around the 2005 time period, coinciding with the pharmaceutical industry getting greater control, in my view, over the media and practically everything else, that question's no longer asked. And it used to be, again, that's the natural thing you would ask. Not that that's the only thing to blame, but you certainly want to know. It's not even asked by the media now. Like, people don't say, was the kid being treated and what medicine was he on? And just like, that's not a question anymore. And
or did he have a father in the home? And
that too. But I would bet money that these things are, I would bet money that I'd be willing to bet money the kid has been on medication.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to say one thing before we move on, because I sense that we're about to. For Hyla to sit there while Ethan says this and just go, I view that as a failure of being a wife. You should call your husband on his BS right there, right then, especially if he has a huge show that he's trying to make a difference to people, which I assume Ethan is trying to do. But I just want to point that out because I see that as a cultural failing, because it seems like women no longer recognize that they are supposed to be the check to their man and be like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't act that
I don't
way.
think Ethan is trying to do anything. I don't think he knows
How
anything.
gendered of you.
I know, terrible. I'm sorry.
When Steven Crowder wanted to have a conversation with Ethan Klein.
Oh, yeah, it's bad.
Ethan brought in Sam Cedar instead, ambushing Crowder, who was like, okay, whatever, fine, bye. Ethan Klein says he doesn't know anything about politics. So it's his words. He's correct. But there's something that's fascinating that's happened as politics has become pop culture. I think I don't know, the establishment class, the Uniparty, the Democrats, the Pelosi type, they were so desperate to defeat Donald Trump, they did everything in their power to make politics pop culture, and now they will regret it. You do not want people who have no idea what they're talking about to be violently angry over these things. It's like all that energy you see when there's a baseball game lost or won, people riot throughout the city or whatever. Turn that into a political issue. It's gonna you don't want that. When I was younger, I used to say I wish people cared more about politics, and then I started to understand the average person has no interest in actually understanding it. They just want to fit in. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, I want the people who care about this stuff and want to help make the world a better place care about it. I do wish everybody really did care about it in the sense that they would read and understand it. What we got now is people like Ethan Klein, who has no idea what he's talking about, calls for gun control and violence against people who have guns. And it's kind of like, you're advocating for guns? Like you're giving people the reason to need them, but he doesn't care. When I think about this idea of the grifter in the political space, they say like so-and-so is a grifter or whatever. It's like, let me tell you, if someone is career-wise, like their whole life was politics, journalism, and news, and they talk about those issues, I probably wouldn't call them a grifter unless they did specific things. Like Ethan Klein being a comedy podcast, jumping into politics, I'm like, yo, that is definition grifting. He was like, hey, this edgy comedy is no longer good. What do I do? Let's start a podcast. He interviews Jordan Peterson. Well, Jordan Peterson was getting popular. Then, it's not popular with the left. So he takes the episodes down and says, I shouldn't have interviewed Jordan Peterson. He's just doing whatever he has to do to maintain a product for people. There you go.
Yeah. No. Did you want to? That kind of thinking, that kind of behavior, it's a problem of just the total value of virtue, a breakdown of the family. But also, I don't know his specific case, but you look at the way the media, and sort of instructs people to behave, and you also look at the way the educational system here. And I have no idea where he was educated, but speaking more broadly about our culture as a whole, I believe it was Thomas Sowell who made the observation that kids in school are taught it's very important to care about making a difference. They're not really taught that it's very important to know all that much about the thing you're trying to make a difference within. And it's very interesting that that's sort of our cultural ethos. I'm going to make a difference. Okay, well, what kind of difference? Just because you made something different doesn't mean you made it better. If you didn't know what you were doing, you probably made it worse. But people aren't encouraged to do any of the real work that it takes to become informed about something before commenting on it or before trying to make some kind of differences. An
How
activist
about learn math?
Exactly. Hey, that's what kids in school should be doing. But then outside of that, when people go out into the world and they say they want to be an activist, I think there's a fantastic example of this in Matt Walsh's film. I haven't seen it yet, but even just in the preview where he asks these women at a women's march, what is a woman? And they can't give him an answer. How can you be at the Women's March and not be able to give an answer to the question, what is a woman? Can you imagine if you went to like a gun rights march or something and asked what is a gun and the person couldn't give you a definition? It's ludicrous.
I want to point something else out. This is someone, I saw this in the super chat. This is Storm Viking who mentioned this. Trump spoke at the NRA event. Yeah. Ethan Klein called for terror against an event that had the former president at it with Secret Service details. So this is, it's crazy. This is the state we're in.
It's okay because it was against Trump.
But I'm going to say so guys, get ready to drink because I'm going to say those two magic words. Civil war.
Snap.
Here's what I see. I think most people who've watched the show have probably heard me make this point, but again, I some people are like, I've heard this before, Tim. Not everybody's heard it. Boomers are mostly unified in their politics. There's little division among boomers. They do have their wedge issues. Gen Xers are similar. But millennials are so divided that you can have someone like Ethan Klein call for an act of terror. Like, how does that even happen? Like, I can't imagine growing up someone accidentally calling for a terror attack against an event with the former president speaking at. I mean, that just sounds absurd to me. But we're at the point now where, let's just say, he got too passionate. That's what he said, and it slipped out. What's the next generation going to be like? If Ethan has no reason to try and to apologize for this, and he basically didn't. He just said, I got a little passionate, and then he said Republicans are the party of dead children, further inflaming tribal tensions. Instead of just saying, yeah, I should not have said that, I'm so sorry, guys, we got to tone things down. No, he actually escalated the rhetoric against Republicans. If that's the direction things are going, you take a look at how the parallel economies have emerged. This is something that I warned about several years ago. 2018, I said, if we keep seeing censorship, I talked about this with Jack Dorsey, you will force people to create a parallel economy if they are to function. Banning people and taking away their livelihood will not stop them from living. It will force them to find alternate means of trade. Eventually, you will see a larger and larger parallel economy separate from yours. Once that happens, people will have no reason whatsoever to accommodate the other. Ethan Klein is a perfect example. He can call for this, and the only reason, in my opinion, he walked it back is because he knew YouTube would strike at his income. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.